All right. Read old magazines back from rioting and throwing bricks through windows. Once again, as always, this series on the Buckley family is powered by the yellow can, the yerba mate. I'm drinking blue for you right now. Shirt. David Icke is wrong. It's actually navy blue. I don't know if this is navy blue. I guess it's navy blue that keeps away the demonic lizard people, not turquoise. So anyway, uh, just more on the Buckley family. I'm just going to keep reading articles on this because it brings up the most relevant amount of information. Um, and this will focus on Spanish, uh, Mexican synarchism. And if you remember, a lot of these Spanish fascists were part of the propaganda duo lodge, which is originally a Masonic institution of Mazzini. And if you know the history of fascism, both fascism and Marxism come out of Mazzini and the Carbonari, and which was basically supported by the House of Savoy and uh, and the Bonaparte family, which is directly related to uh, the Pallavicini family, which runs most of and the House of Borghese, which runs most of the traditional Catholic groups, or has major amount of influence on these groups, and it's a breakaway from actual Catholic tradition to a kind of Gallican state-based religion, God Emperor religion. And this is something directly tied to Napoleon and a lot of the uh, philosophical influences on Napoleon, such as Joseph de Maistre and what the hell's his name? Fabre d'Olivet, who is actually the guy that termed what Nietzsche would later use triumph of the will. So, um, the, the traditional Catholic movement is steeped in these occult ideas of synarchy, and it was actually also Mussolini um, was heavily influenced. Well, his economic advisor, Count Volpi from Venice, was a synarchist, and he wanted to create the Italian model on the model of Joseph Alexander St. Ives de Alvedre, who created the term synarchism, wanted to merge the church with Freemasonry as a kind of collective front against materialism, and also proposed the kind of this sociological economic system called synarchism, which is not separate from that Freemasonic Catholic idea. The merger of the two directly influences Count Volpi, who is then the economic minister of Mussolini. Um, and then also, just another point of relevance, Madame Pallavicini passed leadership of the black nobility to Princess Borghese, who was a close friend with Gloria Taxis. They're all running the traditional circles and the salons where, like the Dignitatis Humanae Institute runs out of, and Steve Bannon's new school, Judeo Christian West School out of a monastery in Tresalti. Um, that's all the same circles there. Very close to the circles that run the St. Basil Foundation of Constantine Malafiev, KGB, FSB asset Constantine Malafiev, the top Orthodox funder in Russia. But also Alessandra Mussolini, um, who runs all over the place. She goes from the left to the right to the left to the right, but always kind of these fascist organizations around Robert Fiore, um, was also passed the torch from Madame Pallavicini. Remember, this is a descendant of Napoleon Bonaparte. and Napoleon's almost successful attempt to destroy the Catholic Church and make it a state-based institution. Um, an institution that serves a concept of kind of a fascist God Emperor empire. And so we're going to be talking about how the Buckleys fit into this. The first document, and I'm going to try to be pretty quick because I have to go soon. If we don't make it to the second document about the FBI, um, Division 5 links between the Pan Party and the Soviets, we'll just read it later. But this is about the infiltration of the LaRouche movement by some Carlist associated individuals. And well, LaRouche was in prison, but it has a nice timeline about the Buckley family. So we're going to go into that. The Quijano family, Quijano dossier and the national security threat to the United States. This blue foria is not as powerful as Magic Mint or whatever it's called. Um, I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. Uh, so I'm going to have some reading errors here. But this is called the Quijano dossier and the national security threat to the United States. So the little subheading here, the LaRouche in 2004 campaign committee released this chronology and fact sheet on July 23rd in connection with the Lyndon LaRouche July 15 webcast statement on the terrorist threat. Democratic Party presidential candidate Lyndon H. LaRouche Jr. on July 15th identified former associate Fernando Quijano as part of serious national security threat to the United States. Also, hey, Raphael, what's up, buddy? He identified Quijano as a bit player in the third-generational Nazi international apparatus involving the likes of Spanish Falange fascist Blas Pinar and leading Mexican synarchist circles. It is the apparatus of Spain, Italy, France, and the Western Hemisphere-based regrouped Falange fascists and outright Nazis, which is being primed for terrorist operations targeted in the United States of both a right-wing and left-wing synarchist pedigree. The so-called left-wing synarchist apparatus is typified today by the putschist networks of Humala brothers in Peru, the Cocalero narco-insurgents now staging an insurrection in the breakup of Bolivia along ethnic lines, and the ruling Hugo Chavez regime in Venezuela, which flaunts its support for the legal theories of crown jurist of Hitler Nazi state Carl Schmitt. The right-wing synarchist manifestation is typified by Quijano and his handful of collaborationists in a splinter group MSI small letter A, so maybe MSI Alpha, who are openly allied with Spain's Blas Pinar, and the circles of Robert Fiore and Alessandra Mussolini in Italy. Remember, we talked about directly financed by, controlled by the Pallavicini family at that time. Who promote their neo-fascist revival under the banner "We are the children of Mussolini." And the thing is, you can say, "Oh well, the Pallavicinis are fascists, so what?" Well, they also support the They are also some of the major backers of Muslim immigration to Italy. Okay, two of their family members are sheiks, and probably still all being paid by the family's foundation, the Fondi. Um, but eh, they're also backstabbers. They ran around acting like they supported the just war theory concerning the Iraq War, supporting John Paul II against the Iraq War, and they actually went over and were engaged in conferences with the neocons to support the Iraq War. This is the same person, Madame Pallavicini, who's doing this. Um, these are people that rule by deception. Um, the active involvement. Oh, so yeah, Robert Fiore and Alessandro Mussolini in Italy, who promote their neo-fascist revival under the banner "We are the children of Mussolini." And if you want to see a example of Nazi communism or false left-right dialectic that might be maybe Casa Pound represents, which is now being promoted by E. Michael Jones, look at Alessandra Mussolini and her going back and forth in political parties. A pro-LGBT, pro-women's rights, pro-abortion, I think, fascist party that she found, and then goes back and forth. And it's funny how many people are tricked into supporting these kinds of individuals. Anyway, going on. The active involvement of Roberto Fiore in the present activation of the transatlantic Nazi fascist revival is the clearest indication of the terrorist potential embedded in this right-wing synarchist apparatus. And remember, Robert Fiore, I believe, was given access to all of G.K. Chesterton's writings somehow after Chesterton died, and Hilaire Belloc put in charge of the distributist movement two fascists, T.S. Eliot and the pedophile Eric Gill. It wasn't just the pedophile, but he also drew all sorts of blasphemous images of like William Blake type sexual imagery of apostles and stuff like this. They ended up joining the British Union of Fascism, the British Union of Fascists under A.K. Chesterton, who was G.K.'s cousin. And meaning they murdered the K.Ch. And that was all under this British propaganda apparatus of the Special Operations Executive, which was designed to propagandize Catholics to support the British Empire. And the same kinds of things are going on today. But A.K. Chesterton was pretty much running this organization underneath Lord Beaverbrook and one of the Hamsworths. I need to go more in depth into that sometime. But Roberto Fiore gets these papers from this organization, either the British Union of Fascists or something, and they're kind of like the adjunct party of the distributist movement, certain kind of Catholic fascist movement. Fiore fled to Great Britain in early 1980s to avoid prosecution for membership in a legal association after he was implicated in the 1969-81 strategy of tension bombings, warfare destabilization of Italy, which culminated with the December 1980 Bologna train station bombing, which killed more than 80 people. Another individual was a Roman mafioso named Michael, I think it was Michael Abruciano or something like this. And I've dug through Italian court hearings, and Abruciano talks about a Madame Pallavicini who he can go to get off the hook for crime, you know. And these mafiosos were also Freemasons. They were also linked into radical, left-right radicalism, like Nazi communist type things. That were kind of subgroups of Robert Fiore's organizations. So, I mean, the Pallavicini links are all over the place, and I got to bring that paper up sometime. I have to dig it out. But it's just kind of like an aside, and there's no more investigation into that. Yeah, I gotta hurry up. As LaRouche warned early this year, March 11, 2004, Madrid train bombings conform precisely to the strategy of tension modus operandi of the right-wing synarchist circles typified by Fiore. The central, albeit underlying, role of Quijano in the neo-Nazi resurgence and the consequent terrorist threat to the United States is of added significance due to Quijano's longstanding status as an asset of the CIA death squad liaison from 1960 to 1967, Nestor Sanchez. Sanchez was identified in the Lawrence Walsh Iran-Contra Independent Council report as pivotal participant in the crisis pre-planning group and special situation group, two White House intelligence units headed by Vice President George H.W. Bush. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was the staff secretary of both the Crisis Pre-Planning Group and Special Situation Group. The career CIA officer Sanchez was at the time the Undersecretary of Defense for International Security Affairs and served as a point of contact for another former CIA officer, Felix Rodriguez, who ran the right-wing assets in Central America in Honduras and El Salvador. Rodriguez's operation included guns for drugs trafficking between Colombia, where I believe Tradition Family and Property was operating with the narco-terrorist group Morena as its political wing, Central America, and the United States. Aspects of this narco-insurgency feature of the Nicaraguan Contras White House program was documented by Senator John Kerry in his Kerry Commission study for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. In spring 1985, when the LaRouche sponsored the production of a published report and an hour-long video documentary Soviet unconventional warfare in Ibero-America, the case of Guatemala exposing the narco-insurgency in the region. Nestor Sanchez personally intervened to spike the collaboration between LaRouche associates and the Guatemalan participants, despite the fact that Sanchez's role in this effort was known to Quijano. 2 years later, at the latest, Sanchez had cultivated a special relationship with Quijano. By 1987, Quijano was boasting to select colleagues that Sanchez was a high-level CIA channel and that Sanchez had assured him that LaRouche would go to prison and never get out alive. This was more, and the big problem, I think, between this traditional Catholic establishment and LaRouche is that LaRouche called them out on their associations with the Club of Rome, which was essentially made up of all these ex-fascist propaganda duo lodge members and many traditional Catholic type individuals. And the Club of Rome is a pro-genocide or pro-eugenics group, which, I mean, like, you could say it's pro-white. It's against third world population growth. But even then, even if you're a white supremacist, they also agreed that there's certain problems um, with the carrying capacity in regards to even white people. So that'll piss a whole bunch of people off. But that's the Club of Rome, and the Club of Rome was very influential in Father Paul Mark's pro-life movement and the CNP's pro-life movement, and basically undermined any aspect. So LaRouche and his Club of Life attacked this whole thing, and this is where there was a vendetta from these traditional Catholics and the LaRouche movement. Because LaRouche is pro-development, they're anti-development, they're anti-armament. Like the picture I have there with Fulton J. Sheen and William Buckley, they're actually discussing de-armament of the United States. And they believe that, oh, well, we have to fight it on a cultural program. And this is really the old America First type isolationist view, where America should destroy all of its influence in the world and crawl into a hole. And a lot of people in foreign countries would like to see that happen. So, in spring 1985, when LaRouche sponsored the production of a thing, we read that Nestor Sanchez personally intervened. Okay, here we go. So, Sanchez assured him that Quijano, LaRouche, would go to prison and never get out alive. This was more than a year prior to the federal trial in Alexandria, Virginia, in which LaRouche was railroaded into federal prison on a 15-year sentence. Quijano continued to spread the lie that LaRouche would never leave prison alive among members of the LaRouche Association in Ibero-America, Germany, and the United States, up through January 26, 1994, when LaRouche was released from federal prison on parole. In the same time frame that Sanchez-Quijano relationship was developing, Quijano was also establishing deep ties to Blas Pinar, the former official in the Franco government in charge of the Institute for Hispanic Culture in Madrid, which ran phalanges recruiting operations through Ibero-America. During the period of Sanchez's active CIA involvement with the Central American death squads, Blaise Pinar, his son, had participated in an attempted military coup in Spain, which was crushed when the King Juan Carlos refused to give his imprimatur to a fascist putsch. The Quijano dossier is of vital importance for security services chronology of the Western Hemisphere. The chronology is principally based on the recent article by William F. Wirtz Jr. published in the July 9th and July 16th issues of Executive Intelligence Review, called The Nazi-Instigated National Synarchist Union of Mexico, What It Means for Today. And we'll read more about this because it's very closely tied to what the Buckley family was doing in Mexico and the kinds of politics that they were involved in the United States. That is controlled left-wing and right-wing fascism, the right-wing fascism, neoconservatism, and the left-wing fascism, the Bakuninite Institute of Policy Studies. This was a Rockefeller-funded organization which probably its most famous uh, intellectual was Noam Chomsky, who openly praises Mikhail Bakunin, the founder of fascism. Okay, and this is the origins of Antifa. This is the origins of Black Bloc, and the kind of rioting that you see today. Uh, and it's amazing. So many people, even Lenin, called this fascism of the left. So we're going on. Timeline of the Sinarchist terror threat. In 1910, beginning of the Mexican Revolution to establish Mexican national sovereignty, the revolution is an historical continuation of earlier efforts, including those of Mexican President Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez was a complete asshole, but in terms of the rights of the state and in terms of political matters, he was kind of right. Okay. In terms of spiritual matters, he was a complete asshole. He forged an alliance with U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. Once again, in terms of the state, Abraham Lincoln was right. In terms of spiritual matters, he was a complete asshole. He was a theosophist, I believe. To establish a community of principle between Mexico and the USA. 1917, Mexican Constitution includes articles which declare that Mexican subsoil resources belong to Mexico and which limit the power of the Catholic Church according to the principle of separation of church and state as reflected in the U.S. Constitution and precedent of Spain's Bourbon King Carlos III. Um, so even with the suppression of the Jesuits by Clement XIV, the Jesuits, one of the major charges was that they were running the colonial trade and profiting from the colonial trade. And this has always been a problem in South America under this integralist system. That it's basically a looting operation, and that's why the Mexican Constitution includes articles which declare that this Mexican subsoil resources belong to Mexico. Okay. This is a historical problem in Mexico. If you don't live in Mexico or you don't know the history, you don't understand it. And that's why so many Catholics are so wrong when they say, well, it would have been great if Maximilian I was on the throne in Mexico. And Cristero Rebellion was so great. And there are aspects of it that are good, but we're going to go on. 1921, oilman William F. Buckley Sr. and Thomas W. Lamont of the J.P. Morgan banking interest from the American Association formed the American Association of Mexico to overthrow the Mexican Revolution. November 1921, Buckley is expelled from Mexico by President Alvaro Obregón for participating in a counter-revolutionary conspiracy. Obregón is then assassinated in 1928. You see this spike in assassination capacity with organizations surrounding Buckley, Otto Habsburg, and this Nazi International, like what becomes the World Association, World Anti-Communist League, in that. And this is why it's so believable that these individuals, the Hunt family, very close to the Buckley family, were responsible for the Kennedy assassination. I claim that that's the truth. I'm just saying it's believable. 1926-29. They're implicated in the assassination of the Trotsky, very, very closely implicated in the assassination of Trotsky, as well, and countless other people. 1926-29, the Cristero Rebellion is launched in Mexico to back the feudal privileges of the Jesuit-controlled ultramontane Mexican Catholic Church in alliance with the foreign oil interests. The rebellion is backed by the Buckley Morgan interests. Buckley refers René Capistran Garza, leader of the Jesuit-created Catholic Association of Mexican Youth, and the National League for the Defense of Religious Liberty, which form the core of the Cristeros, to Nicholas Brady, president of the New York Edison Company and the United Electric Light and Power Company, for funding. 1934, the National League for the Defense of Religious Liberty is replaced by the Legion and subsequently what's called the Base. The Base is a secret church-controlled organization which has 11 sections. Acción Nacional, which later became the PAN Party, is the first, and the National Synarchist Union is the 11th. So the first and 11th sections of the Base. 1934, Hitler, who consolidated his power in Nazi Germany in 1933, begins to focus on Mexico as the key to his strategy for Ibero-America. 1934, Hitler appoints General Wilhelm von Faupel to direct the Ibero-American Institute in Berlin. Von Faupel was a member of the staff of the Argentine War College in Buenos Aires in 1911, the military counselor to Inspector General of the Argentine Army in 1921, held a high military post in the Brazilian Army in 1926, and later in 1926 became Inspector General of the Peruvian Army. Fascists backed the fascist insurgency of General Francisco Franco in Spain and promote the phalange of Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera in Spain as the vehicle for penetrating a of the German Nazi Party. June 13th, 1936, Oscar Helmuth Schreiter, a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party, founds the Anti-Communist Center in Guanajuato, Mexico. May 23rd, 1937, according to now declassified U.S. and Mexican intelligence documents, the same union in the city of Leon, in the Mexican state of Guanajuato. According to U.S. intelligence, the Nazi Schreiter provided all of the finances for UNS during the first year of operation from the Nazi German legation in Mexico City. Interesting, the city of Lyon, like Lyon, France, is the center of this fake Freemasonic traditional Catholic rite. Interesting, the National Synarchist, which is directly linked back to Joseph de Maistre, Martinism, and Synarchy. It's like the headquarters, the Lodge of Lyon. Just an interesting connection there. November 1st, 1937, the first National Synarchist Union Regional Committee in the United States is founded in Los Angeles. Other regional committees are founded in Bakersfield, California, and El Paso and McAllen, Texas. Over 50 local committees exist. The Synarchists plan to organize espionage and sabotage in the United States on behalf of the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese. March 18th, 1938, Mexican Lázaro Cárdenas expropriates foreign oil holdings. Excuse me. This is the Bluephoria coming. That's what's making me belch here. Standard Oil and Royal Dutch Shell launch a boycott of Mexico, which forces Mexico to sell its oil to the Axis powers and opens Mexico to Nazi penetration operations. Remember, those are the Morgan oil interests doing this. October 8th, 1938, Hitler and Franco signed a pact giving the Nazis the power to direct Spain's national and international policy. Schools are established for Spanish fascists in Hamburg, Bremen, Hanover, and Vienna. Hans Hellermann, the head of the Nazi Party in Spain in 1936, is deployed to Mexico on orders of the Ibero-American Institute to give training to the Spanish Phalange. August 23rd, 1939, June 22nd, 1941. While the Hitler-Stalin Pact is in effect, the Nazis and Communists work together to oppose Yankee imperialism. Exactly what's happening today between fascist networks and some of the left-wing networks like Casa Pound and the Eurasianists around the satanic fourth political theory, Alexander Dugin, and Russia. So it's not just ideological, it's also same state actors doing the same thing. End of 1940, von Faupel arranges for General Franco and Colonel Fugurito, representing Japan's General Tojo, to sign a secret treaty laying the basis for Nazi Phalange and Imperial Japanese coordination of military operations in Mexico, the rest of Ibero-America, and the Philippines. The plan for Mexico includes the option of an invasion of the United States from Mexico. 1940, William F. Buckley Sr. promotes Nelson Rockefeller to head the Office of Coordination of Inter-American Affairs. Rockefeller is an executive of Standard Oil, which supplies oil to Nazi Germany and Japan before the Pearl Harbor, and continues to supply oil to Franco's Spain after Pearl Harbor. Before the war, Avery Rockefeller, nephew of John D. Rockefeller, was a partner in Schroeder Rockefeller Company, an investment bank whose other partners include Baron Bruno von Schroeder in London and Kurt von Schroeder of the Bank of International Settlements, I believe also involving E. Michael Jones' favorite economist, Hjalmar Schacht, the Nazi finance economist. I think his daughter married Otto Scarenzi or something, who was a direct collaborator with Otto Habsburg in some of these coup attempts in Spain after the war. Kurt von Schroeder of the Bank for International Settlements and the Gestapo in Cologne, Germany. Alan Dulles was a board member of this bank. January 8th, 1941, Franco establishes the Council of Hispanidad in the avenue through which the reestablishment in the Spanish Empire under Nazi domination. The fascist ideology of Hispanidad, designed by von Frappel, is to be used against Roosevelt's pan-American good neighbor policy. 1941, Cardinal Francis J. Spellman becomes the Grand Protector and spiritual advisor to the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Now, this is where I believe probably the British came in to take over, meaning there used to be a firm split between the Knights of Malta and what's John, and there's some other like Russian organization. At one time, Schmalm rejected the British, and at somewhere around here, at this point, Schmalm starts to integrate the Sovereign Order of St. John, and you get more and more kind of anti-population, pro-population control policies and such going on. The Iran-Contra scandal involving the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, too, comes out of this whole thing. The treasurer of SMOM is John J. Raskob, who was the head of the Democratic National Committee, opposed Franklin D. Roosevelt's nomination and election in 1932, and worked with Morgan's bank John Davis to finance a planned military coup against FDR in 1934. William F. Buckley Sr., Nicholas Brady, and William F. Buckley Jr., and James Jesus Angleton are all members of SMOM. I guess it's just an aside note. November 1941, U.S. intelligence reports that the Japanese legation in Mexico has set aside a large fund to finance an armed movement of synarchists in the U.S. Southwest. November 1941, Roosevelt and Mexican President Avila Camacho signed Good Neighbor Policy Agreement recognizing Mexico's sovereign control over its oil resources. November 30, 1941, creation of National Anti-Synarchist Committee for the Defense of Democracy in the Mexican Congress. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor is attacked by Imperial Japanese. December 12, 1941, National Synarchist Union Chief Salvador Abascal is replaced by Manuel Torres Bueno. Abascal proceeds to set up a colony in Baja California Sur, near the Bay of Magdalena, where the Japanese have plans to establish a naval base. One of his closest collaborators is a Japanese Mexican. His personal secretary is a member of the Nazi Party of Mexico, operating under a Mexican pseudonym. The project is identified by Mexican Deputy Alfredo Felix Diaz Escobar as a German and Japanese concern. November 1943, Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, the pro-Franco ally of equally pro-Franco Cardinal Francis J. Spellman. And there's this myth that Sheen and Spellman were completely at odds with one another because Spellman's this. And he was also, I think, blackmailed by the Roy Cohn machine, the Brownstone operation in New York City. And it's just an aside, Brownstone refers to New York City townhouses that are made of brownstone. Okay, it's unique to New York City, and this is how one of the ways that New York took over politics in this country. And the Roy Cohn operation is a big part of that, and we know that Roy Cohn was very close to William F. Buckley, and the East Side Conservative Club was also people like the Yippies, which was controlled by people around Institute for Policy Studies, that left-controlled fascist network under Rockefeller Foundation. He represented some of those individuals as well, but we have to go on. Francis Spellman, and I like Fulton J. Sheen's homilies in that, but he certainly has a past that people are carpeting over to their own detriment. You can't be making myths about people. You need to look at history truthfully. Okay, so November 1943, Fulton J. Sheen and pro-Franco ally Francis Spellman meet with the leadership of the National Synarchist Movement and the PAN party. In the aftermath of the U.S. victory in Midway and Russian victory at Stalingrad, Sheen and Spellman persuade the church-controlled UNS to abandon its public anti-American rhetoric and reorient towards a post-war form of Anglo-American fascism. Okay, so at least, they tried to get it to be pro-American. Based on the writings of the Argentine fascist priest Julio Mainville, Julio Mainville. Uh, I think I can complete this in time. April 10, 1944, Jose Antonio de la Lama Roya attempts to assassinate Mexican President Avila Camacho. The National Synarchist Union holds a memorial for de la Lama. The National Synarchist Union newspaper appeals to the Mexican army to carry out a coup. Synarchist meetings are banned. Its newspaper is suspended and its editor indicted. February 1945, the base, which controls the National Synarchist movement, moves to replace Torres Bueno as UNS chief. When he refuses to resign, the base takes over the UNS, thus creating two factions which continue to the present day. 1952, William F. Buckley Jr. is assigned by James Jesus Angleton, Director of Counterintelligence for the CIA under Allen Dulles, to set up the CIA's first office in Mexico City. After World War II, Dulles, who became the wartime Office of Strategic Services Operations in Germany and who worked with Angleton, head of the OSS in Italy, protected his Nazi collaborators. Members of the Nazi SS leadership were spirited out of Germany via the Rat Line, first to Italy and then to Franco's Spain, whence they escaped to Ibero-American countries. And it is James Jesus Angleton who legitimized Anatoly Golitsyn, who is a commander of the British Empire and was taken in by MI6. Generally, with Soviet detractors, like this other guy, this other joker, who talked about cultural Marxism and all of that, Yuri Bezmenov, they will mirror what is already believed and appeal to confirmation bias, but also provide precedent for that country's international agendas. So Yuri Bezmenov is the guy that pushes the perestroika deception. A lot of people on Twitter that I follow talk about this. And I say you have to be wary about that because Anatoly Golitsyn was telling British intelligence exactly what they wanted to hear with a little bit of additional information. And I mean, Angleton was right in terms of things like Henry Kissinger being a Soviet asset for pushing detente. This is a CIA counterintelligence director saying this, okay? He was right, except that pro-Soviet stance was actually mediated through Chatham House, which is the Royal Institute of International Affairs, effectively serving British intelligence. 1954, the National Synarchist Union reorganizes itself, creating a series of primary schools and institutes. The later are military confessional schools of the medieval type. The purpose is to take over Mexico from within. 1955, the Phalange Church Council is reorganized into the National Organization of the Anvil. Its leadership includes Salvatore Abascal until his death in 2000. 1955, the Anvil creates Frente Universitario Anticomunista in Puebla. In 1961, the Movimiento Universitario de Renovadora Orientación in Mexico City, and in 1971, the Ticos and Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara. These organizations constitute notorious and savage street thug capabilities that figure into several attempted destabilizations of the Mexican nation. Since the late 1960s and early 1970s. In the late 1960s, the Ticos, under the leadership of the son of the founder of the Popular Union, Anacleto Gonzalez Flores, emerges as a faction in opposition to the Anvil. The Popular Union, based in Jalisco, was the core of the Cristero movement. Before she resigned from association with the LaRouche movement, Maravilla Carrasco and her collaborators would give their political contacts a copy of Anacleto Gonzalez Flores' book, You Will Be King. 1966, Blas Pinar founds the pro-Franco-fascist party Fuerza Nueva in Madrid, Spain. 1968, Salvador Abascal publishes the bi-monthly combat newsletter with his collaborator. 1972, the Anvil creates a religious order called the Society of Crusaders for Christ the King to infiltrate the Mexican armed forces. December 1981, Blas Pinar's son, Spanish Army captain Blas Pinar Gutierrez, publishes a manifesto defending military officers implicated in a coup attempt 10 months earlier, for which he is incarcerated for 2 months. Today, the rehabilitated younger Pinar is Brigadier brigadier general in Spanish Army. That is in 2004. 1985, the Society of Crusaders for Christ the King becomes the official spiritual advisors to the Mexican army, thus effecting a significant takeover of the Mexican army on behalf of the organizers of the Sinarchist Cristero Rebellion. 1985, LaRouche's associates in Mexico published a book entitled The PAN Party of Treason, which documents the Nazi origins of the National Sinarchist Union and PAN. 1985, the reaction of the publication of PAN book, Fernando Quijano defends Jose Vasconcelos, who was a member of the Church Phalange Council of Hispanidad, a sub-chief of the National Sinarchist Union, and the editor of Timon, a magazine shut down in 1940 by the Mexican government because it was pro-Nazi. Quijano begins to attack Friedrich Schiller and Erasmus and defend the Habsburgs while denouncing Spain's Carlos III as Masonic. Salvador Lorenzo, Quijano ghostwriter, makes the same argument. Quijano deploys Ricardo Olvera of Mexico to Spain for 8 months to establish an office there. Before his trip, Olvera is supporter of Mexican President Benito Juarez. Upon his return, he is brainwashed supporter of Franco. At a Christmas party, Quijano sings the songs of Cristeros. 1985-87, Fernando Quijano becomes an asset of the CIA death squad liaison, Nestor Sanchez, who assures him that LaRouche will go to prison and never get out. August 1988, Amphinctionic Congress takes place in Panama, organized by General Antonio Noriega. Fernandez Quijano organizes Argentina fascist Mario Campaneto and Rafael Braidi Obeid to attend, both of whom 4 years later attend the founding conference of Ibero-America Solidarity Movement, MSI Alpha in Tlaxcala, Mexico. January 27th, 1989, LaRouche and several of his associates are framed up and railroaded into prison. 1988-90, Maravilla Carrasco travels to Spain, meets Francoite fascist Pinar, who introduces her to other high-level Spanish fascists. 1990, Alejandro Pina of Venezuela is sent to Argentina for the first time by Quijano. September 1990, while LaRouche is wrongfully imprisoned in the United States, Quijano delivers an anti-Semitic fascist speech entitled Black Legend Hides Truth of the History of Americas, defending the Spanish Inquisition and the expulsion of the Jews and Moors from Spain in an repudiation of everything LaRouche stands for. And I don't know, this could be an attempt by the LaRouche movement to distance themselves from that, but going on. 1991, Alejandro Pina goes to Argentina for the second time and returns with a new line defending tradition, family, and property as Caballeros, gentlemen. LaRouche had previously exposed TFP as an oligarchical, secretive paramilitary cult, militantly opposed to John Paul II. And there are pictures of these people using John Paul II's picture as target practice, and they were kicked out of Venezuela for that reason. And there's all these other primary sources confirming their links to Gnosticism and narco-terrorism that are not LaRouche associated, including the Montfort Association, but people still think that they have some sort of credibility. Anyway, August 1991, Alejandro Pena begins study of Argentina anti-Semite fascist priest Julio Mainvela, whose economic views he promotes under the influence of Fernando Quijano. 1991-92, Carrasco meets frequently with the National Sinarchist Union chief Salvador Abascal and his collaborator Salvatore Borrego. May 1992, while LaRouche is still wrongfully in prison, Quijano founds the Ibero-American Solidarity Movement, MSI Alpha, with the same initials of Mussolini's MSI in Tlaxcala, Mexico. Attendees include Argentine fascist Mario Campaneto and Rafael Braida Obeid, and the brother of Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. Wasn't that weird? Hugo Chavez is supposed to be, a leftist. The MSI Alpha functions as a Trojan horse deployed against LaRouche from its inception. Ricardo Olvera gives a speech praising Franco and Hispanidad, which he ended with Viva Franco, Vivo Iturbide. Iturbide had proclaimed himself Emperor of Mexico in 1822. He was executed as a traitor in 1824. He is the hero of Jesuit Father Bernard Burgund, and National Sinarchist Union chief Salvador Abascal. 1992, Alessandro Pina's third trip from Argentina lasts 8 months, during which he begins to research on Jose Antonio Prima de Riviera, the founder of the Spanish Phalange, whose theories Quisiano had already begun to advocate in 1991 prior to the Tlaxcala Conference. June 1992, the Spaniard Eduardo Casaramona Abiols, who in personal representative Blas Pinar in Iberoamerica, contacts the MSI Alpha in Mexico. His wife is the personal secretary of former Chilean dictator General Augusto Pinochet, I believe, member of the propaganda duo Lodge of Licio Gelli. Part of the fake traditional Catholic, the Masonic infiltration of the Catholic Rite. During the 1990s, he stays with the MSI Alpha's Alessandro Pina whenever he visits Venezuela. He is close to Pina, that he knows about Pina's resignation from association with LaLouche in 1998 before it was made public. Caseramona's first contacts are made with Ada and Ricardo Olivera. Olivera, who was brainwashed during 8 months in Spain in 1985, now works for the newspaper of the Catholic Diocese in Sacramento, California, where he has penned slanders of LaRouche from a synarchist standpoint. Oh my goodness. I don't think we're going to make it. I have to go. So I think we covered all of the Buckley stuff. So I'll post this in the chat if you want to read it. And maybe we'll finish it, but I think that's all the mentions of the Buckleys. Just understanding the role of the Buckley family in the Pan Party, and we'll talk later about that. Oh, well, here's another link. November 2001, the magazine Meritorns. So we'll talk about the Meritorns too, because that's Habsburg and Buckley related. Very strange Catholic organization, in quotes, Catholic. It's launched in Argentina. Its editorial board includes Blas Pinar of Spain, Antonio Caponetta, Rafael Brady Obaid, and Victor Ordonez of Argentina, and Alexandra Wilhelmsen. This is Christendom College we're talking about, daughter and political heir of Frederick Wilhelmsen, co-founder of North Virginia's Christendom College, along with William F. Buckley's brother-in-law, L. Brent Bosel. Alexandra Wilhelmsen, and remember, L. Brent Bosel, I was the person that connected L. Brent Bosel to starting up the Boys Town community, which was trafficking boys to the Lawrence C. King Circle, and apparently also possibly to the White House through Boys Town. L. Brent Bosel was involved with being the first fundraiser for that whole thing, and it's interesting how close the Buckleys are related to some of the people that are implicated in that whole thing. Alexandra Wilhelmsen, like her now deceased father, is based out of the University of Dallas in Texas, which is a base of operation for Otto von Habsburg and the Buckley-connected pro-Franco Nashville Agrarian Distributist Alliance. Ann Carroll, the wife of Christendom College co-founder Warren Carroll, established a network of pro-Franco Carlist private Catholic schools in Northern Virginia, attended by children of Fernando Quijano collaborators, beginning approximately in 1995. During the 1970s, the Wilhelmsens and Carrolls attended annual 2-month-long seminars at Escritorial, Spain. There's a lot more links, but I'll add, because we're almost done. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, Michael Jones. So Christendom College is the center, besides the same operations, same sort of operations run by Prince Lobkowitz in Mexico. He's part of these operations promoting solidarism among these synarchist groups. The only other place where solidarism in America is taught is Christendom College. And E. Michael Jones sits there and calls that a CIA operation, but then sells solidarism. That's his major thing, solidarism, which itself was under the sponsorship of the Wittelsbacher family, which was one of the major founders of the Bilderberg Group, along with the Lobkowitz family. And they'll sit there and try to tell you that the Bilderberg Group is this globalist institution. No, it might be, but it's firstly derived from these black nobility families in Germany and Bavaria. But I just wanted to mention that. He sits there and calls Christendom College a CIA operation, and then that person who works for Christendom College is the chief expert on solidarism, writes for Culture Wars magazine. And Michael Jones' enemy isn't actually the CIA. It's those people that are under Soviet British influence that he ignores. And it's all, let's blame America for this. Let's blame the Anglo-American establishment. Let's put it in a limited context to attack the America part the most. And that's how he serves as a Russian asset and a British asset as well. He has a lot of British connections that nobody really notices, but they're there, especially with a lot of the distributors' publications out there. But anyway, give me a thumbs up. Buy the Yellow Can, join the Yellow Can cult, and have a good one. We'll continue with the other article I was going to read. That you see in the thumbnail there later on, but that's just a timeline of this party, how it connects to the Buckley family, and you can kind of see the Buckleys running this whole thing in Mexico. They're also running their own thing here in the United States that resembles it, but in an American fashion. So hope that kind of ties together some of the links here. I can't even read the. We have Raphael in the chat, but we also have another guy. I can't read his name on air because I'll get shut down. I don't believe that. I think that's a little narrow-minded, but there's definitely links there. That's pretty silly. Have a good one. Bye-bye.